Hi, I am Chris McCoy. Welcome to the Memphis Flyer podcast. Every week we get together here to talk about what's in the paper, what's going on in Memphis this week. But I have a very special guest this week. This is Mike Doughty, people. Mike
Hello.
Doughty, you know him from Soul Coughing, you know him from a solo career. He's a producer, and I'm just could not be happier to have you on
Oh,
here.
dude, very glad to be here. Thank you.
If you want to check out the paper this week, this is Fairs and Festivals week for spring. We have a whole. That's what we do in our the cover hole we call it. We're listing everything that's coming up in the next 3 months,
Great.
which is one of the great things that we do at the Flyer. It's our value add, is the way I like to say it.
There you go.
And then, but one really cool thing that's coming up a week from today, which is going to be April 9th
April 9th
at the High Tone.
at the High Tone.
Mike here is bringing back Soul Coughing, the band that he fronted in the 90s, started like 89, right?
No, we started, first show was 15th of June, 1992. First show with these four guys. I did like a bunch of other bands and called them Soul Coughing before that when I was like a teenager and in my early 20s. And this was the one that stuck.
The classic lineup.
This is the classic lineup, yes.
So you're from New York originally, right?
Yeah, I mean, my dad was in the Army, so moved around Kansas, Germany, Belgium, California for a minute, Pennsylvania for a minute, but basically upstate New York. He taught at West Point, so that's like 40, 50 miles up from the city.
Yeah.
So then I just moved down to the city when I was 18.
Yeah. Well, okay. So this is going to be a weird question, but were you a like literature kid or were you like a music kid?
I was not a music kid because the 80s were a bad time for trying to learn how to play music. It really, I mean, really,
No,
like everybody, all the musicians were like shredders.
Mhm.
I mean, like all the guitar teachers were shredders,
Mhm.
and like the spirit of like, just start a band and play in a garage and just like go chunka for hours and hours and hours just was not available, at least where I was.
Everybody
Um,
wanted to play Eruption.
Everybody wanted to play Eruption, yeah, yeah, and like there was always a kid in the band that was wheelie wheelie wheelie, and so I just did not want to be a part of that. So I was like drama club and writing poetry and that kind of stuff. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah, people like idolize the 80s now.
yeah.
But when you were alive in the 80s, like it mostly sucked.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Like all the good stuff in the 80s happened despite the 80s.
Thank you. Yes, that's
Yes.
a good way to put it.
Yeah.
That's a good way to put it.
And now the despite the 80s stuff is what people remember as the 80s.
Right. Yeah, there's a Soma FM station called Underground 80s that
Mm.
is like all the great like synth pop.
Yeah,
From the
yeah.
and I was like, wow, honestly, this station says Underground 80s, but it cuts out at like 1984. You know? Well, you've been in Memphis for a while now.
10 years.
10
10 years in
years.
March. 10 years last month. Yeah.
Wow.
Yep.
Yeah. I remember when we heard you were moving, me and my wife, who are like the biggest Soul Coughing fans ever. Laura, so I'm skipping around. This is going to be the second time Soul Coughing played Memphis.
Yeah, we played the New Daisy.
Opening for Jeff Buckley.
Jeff Buckley. I guess that's like 95, 96.
Yeah, that
something like
seems
that.
right.
Yeah.
And LJ, my wife, was there,
Uh-huh.
and she said that she saw you guys and got up and danced, and then left before Jeff Buckley went on.
Oh man. Wow.
So, yeah. So we're old fans, but well, why did you come here?
To Memphis? Like, why did I move here?
Yeah.
Well, so I had to leave New York. I just said I've been in New York for 25, 26 years. And I just wanted to live somewhere where I could buy a house and have like a little studio and like do my thing. So I was going to move to Nashville.
Mm.
And I kind of went down on a fact-finding tour of Nashville. And my friend Jay Russo from Mercury Rev and plays with Nicole Atkins, plays with a bunch of people. He was like, I've always wanted to go to Memphis. And I was like, I don't know anything about Memphis other than I mean, like a deep connection with Otis Redding and Stax. And the day we played the new Daisy, I actually found the site of Stax and like did a pilgrimage to the vacant lot that
Oh
used to be
yeah.
Stax. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it meant a lot to me. So I was like, I don't know anything about what life is like in Memphis, and so I just took a little day trip. You know, drove over and just like immediately fell in love with Midtown, just felt at home, was like, this is where I need to be. And literally found like a for rent sign on South Rembert Street,
Hmm.
like a few blocks behind Otherlands. And I was like, I and called the number and like had an apartment within days.
Yeah.
Like it was just really like a fact finding thing. Like, yeah, what's Nashville like? Maybe do this side trip to Memphis. But the moment I got to Memphis, I was like, this is the place. This is where I need to be. Yeah.
Awesome. I mean, Memphis gets a lot of bad press, but there's just a vibe here, and
Yeah.
there's like, especially I think if you're a musician,
Sure.
it's the holy city of rock and roll.
It sure is.
You know.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I mean, greatest rappers in the history of the world come from here.
Mm-hmm.
And, a tremendous place to be an artist and pursue your craft, with like minimal need for a side job.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, it's a great place to live.
It's cheap to live here.
Cheap to live
That's
here.
why
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
that's
yeah.
why it's good to be an artist in Memphis.
It's great to be here. I love being an artist in Memphis.
Well, you mentioned before, just before we came on, that you are producing Slimeroni.
Yeah, we did a couple tracks. We did them actually like mid-pandemic, and I just never found a way to put them out. But I have a DJ producer moniker UUL.
Mm-hmm.
So I just mixed the tracks. Slimeroni and I did like I think like 8 or 10 of them, and there's like 7 or 8 that I wanted to put out. So I make mad beats at Unapologetic,
Mm-hmm.
mastered them, and really made them sound a lot better than I could make them at home. And we're putting them out one by one over the course of like, I don't know, 9 months or 10 months or something. The first song is called Sugar Mama, and it is out on Spotify under UUL and Slimeroni.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes, so check that out. I'm
Yeah.
gonna go at it.
Yeah, like one of the rap stations is always like running this little promo, like, like, oh, if you're a Memphis rapper, send in a track. And I'm like, I have a clean version of that song. I should send it to whichever of the two
Yeah.
rap stations does it.
Awesome, awesome. So, and I've seen you play with the solo stuff at DKDC.
Sure.
You've done there, and you've really gotten into like improvisation a lot more. I feel like at this
Yes.
phase of your career.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I went to see David Cowser at the Buck when he was doing those legendary
Mm,
residencies, late night residencies, and I was just entranced. Especially I talked to Rory Sullivan, one of his drummers, afterwards. I was like, "How often do you rehearse?" And he goes, "We don't rehearse. Like, we show up and like David gives us a cue and we just do whatever." And I was like, "I want to do that." So I got Cowser's number and said man, it's like a spooky party what you do. And he was like, "That's the band name." And
Spooky
so
Party.
yes, we had this band called Spooky Party that was us and Logan Hanna, Art Edmiston, Stephen Chopek, and Rory, and that's how we started. We started doing gigs at DK, and then my partner from New York, Andrew Scrap Livingston, came down, and we did some gigs, and yeah, we were just doing these improv shows
Hmm.
whenever we could, and it was just a blast.
And you were just going off the dome.
Off top of the head. Yep. Yep. Totally improvised. Yep.
Wow.
We used like we used like hand signals, like sort of a John Zorn thing,
Hmm.
where there's like, different cues are like, speed up, slow down, stop, start, slower, faster, louder, softer, more complicated, simpler, just little, I can't even remember what the signals were, but
Yeah.
we would like signal each other to like control the organism.
Hmm.
But yeah, totally improvised.
Wow, and that's another great bit of Dave Cowser's legacy.
Yeah.
Yeah, we lost him recently to
Yeah, yeah,
cancer,
yeah.
and he was just a super genius.
He was, and he was like one of the great spirits of Memphis.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
he was. Who would I say? I saw him play with when he was playing with Marcella, I think one time, and he would just be like, he could go from this like Andy Summers, like very ambient stuff, and then the next song he would just play straight up like BB King.
Right.
He could just
Yeah.
like that, just
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
go, you know,
Yep.
to the level of like, you know, I wish that I could get, I wish I could sound like Andy Summers.
For real. For real. Yeah, yeah.
So, well, you got Soul Coughing back.
We sure did, yeah.
And I think a lot of people thought that was never going to happen.
I thought it was never gonna happen.
Why not?
I really thought, because it was just a really ugly end, and I mean there were all kinds of dark things that happened during the first life of that band. It was just a dark scene, and
Well, you know,
yeah.
people idolize the 90s, but the truth is, it sucked a lot in the 90s.
Yeah, I mean, like it was the good part of the '90s was there was a lot of money for music.
Mhm.
You know, like underground music would like kind of get the runoff from all the 12 million selling compact discs. So it was perfectly possible to like tour and make a living and like eke out a life from music because there was so much money in music. And firstly, especially the first part of the '90s before the boy bands showed up and Christina
Mhm.
Aguilera and all that stuff. Like grunge, like we made fun of it at the time, but it really like revolutionized the ability of an artist to be like a real creative artist and
Mhm.
like have a commercial life.
Because Dave from the Grifters, in the I directed the documentary about the Antenna Club,
Oh, cool.
and he said, you know, because the Grifters got signed about that time, about the same time that y'all were, like they
Right.
got signed to Matador about the same time that y'all were
That's
getting
right.
big.
Yeah, I remember it well.
And he said, he was like, they were just signing anything.
Mm-hmm.
And if it sounded weird to them, like beforehand, they would be like, no, that's too weird. And afterwards, they were like, well, I don't know, that Nirvana band hit, anything could go.
That is exactly right. Is like a band. Like I remember talking to a guy at a label early on in the life of Soul Coughing, and he was like, I don't know, maybe like this weird little experimental label, this weird experimental label. And then at some point it was like Warner Brothers, Columbia, A&M, Capitol, like all the huge labels were interested in Soul Coughing. Which was just like mind-boggling, like night and day after Nirvana. Yeah.
Yeah. And Soul Coughing, first of all, I've talked to you about this before, Soul Coughing is proof of the absolute stranglehold that Low End Theory, that Tribe Called Quest record had on people at that time.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. That was my North Star, that album. Like I just remember the first time I listened to that whole album on cassette on a drive and just being like, well, that's what I want to do. Like
Mhm.
that, plus Tom Waits, plus like a dash of Paul Westerberg, that's what I wanted to do. And I also felt like I had a poetry teacher, Sekou Sundiata, who really stressed that you can get so much if you're just yourself. If you don't try and put on a front, if you try to be like exactly who you are, that's where like real rich lyricism comes from. And so I leaned into that, plus the sort of the tribe aesthetic and the various other kind of, and then like experimental music. Like I worked at the Knitting Factory, which was like John Zorn, Mark Rebo, Jazz Passengers, like Fred Frith, like the Yamatsuka Ai. I'm gonna name names all day. But like experimental music, which I really connected with, like Public Enemy and that kind of noise aesthetic. So like this kind of noise and that kind of noise. I felt like there was something to be made from that. Yeah.
And this is one of the reasons that I feel like you're a good fit for Memphis, because Memphis has always produced weird hybrids
Yeah.
in music. And if you think about it, rock and roll initially it was a weird hybrid. You know,
Sure,
we're going to
absolutely.
put
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
R&B and country together.
Yep.
What? You know, and then soul is secularized,
Yeah.
sacred music too,
Yep.
and then you see it over and over again, especially for me who's been in Memphis for a long ass
Yeah,
time.
yeah, yeah.
Like Big Ass Truck is the example that I always use. Those guys were, and you were using samples in instrumental based music like way before anybody else was.
Sure, sure.
And but they didn't know. Nobody ever knew what to do with Big Ass Truck. I mean,
Mm.
they got a following. People loved them, but the PR people did not know how to sell this.
Huh.
And you see that over and over in Memphis music, which is again why I think you're such a good fit here, because that soul coughing algorithm was so weird.
Sure,
It
sure.
really stood out at the time, and it really stood out like Screenwriters Blues on the radio. There was nothing like Screenwriters Blues on the
There
radio.
was not, yeah, there was indeed nothing like that on the radio. Absolutely. Yeah,
and it still is like, I don't know, that stuff. I've been listening to Soul Coughing the last 2 days, and it still feels fresh to me,
that's awesome.
and it does, and that's why I'm so happy that we're going to get to see you guys at up close at the High Tone. I watched the stream, which I think was from Brooklyn. You did that
Yeah.
live stream.
First night of the Brooklyn shows, yeah.
It was amazing. Y'all are in for a treat. This is my birthday to myself. By the way.
Oh,
Going
happy
to
birthday.
see you. Thank you. It's this weekend. I'll be older than I am now.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Me too, in fact.
We all will. We all will. But I'm super excited. I mean, how do you feel bringing this act to Memphis?
I mean, it really so when we finally got it together and we agreed to do it, which took like a year of back and forth, I thought it would be successful. I didn't know it would be as successful as it was.
Mhm.
So I was like, we should play it safe. We should we did like 3.5 weeks of shows, skip the Southeast entirely, skip Texas, just did like the big coastal cities, the big Midwestern cities. And then the entire tour, except one show, sold out on day one.
Wow.
Day one of the tickets was like our managers. Their initial thought was that the ticketing systems were broken. They were like, "Oh my God, what's going on? It's broken on the day of the tickets." No, it all sold out, and so I was like, "Well, if this sells out, we got to do it again. We gotta do Memphis."
Mm.
And it's just really the best place to do like an opening salvo for a tour, like a hometown show. I'm really, really pleased that we're doing it.
And this is going to be one of the smaller venues that you play, isn't it?
Yeah, this is the smallest venue that we're playing.
Wow.
It's like a big underplay.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm just so excited. But well, okay. So Sly Maroney, right?
Yeah.
Who are some of the other folks that you like in Memphis? Who you wanna shout out
I mean,
here?
I love the unapologetic people.
Oh yeah.
Logan Hanna, who I've played with on a couple of tours, and I did an improv residency in Los Angeles that I got like government pandemic money, so I spent it on this thing in LA that I did like 2 months of shows. Mike Watt, Money Mark from the Beasties, Vernon Reed, Dan Wilson, Billy Martin, and I flew Logan out for that using that beautiful government pandemic money. Yeah, just tremendous players. Love going to see Marcella.
Oh, I know. Did you get to see the Groove Tube thing she did?
No.
The projection mapping stuff. She's like inside a circular
Oh, wow.
screen, and Graham Burks from
Graham.
like does like the projection.
Yeah.
It's really amazing.
Yeah, I got it. And Graham's kid has an amazing band.
Yes.
Yeah, Above Jupiter. Yeah.
They're great.
So great. He's such a good songwriter.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And I wanted to. I'm gonna forget people in the local shout out time.
I know. I've come to put you on the spot.
No. I just got to shout people out. Marcella. If it comes to me like toward the end of the interview, I'm gonna like jump in and blurt out the name.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you this. This is a personal question. I know that you got sober in the late 90s.
Yep.
After Soul Coughing broke up.
After Soul Coughing broke up.
So, was it difficult getting back and playing these songs sober?
It was not, actually. It was, like, weirdly not difficult to do it. Like, like, I expected it to sound pretty good. It sounds really good.
Yeah, it sounds
Like, it
great.
sounds like it just kind of blew our minds that, because like, people change, musicians change, little nuances change, and so I figured, like, we're gonna do, like, an approximation of soul coughing, but it's soul coughing. I mean, it's really soul coughing, yeah.
Mhm. Mm. Wow. Well, Mike, Wednesday, April 9th, that is 1 week from today, although this will be out tomorrow, so that's irrelevant. Is it sold out? It's sold out, isn't it?
I'm not sure.
It should be.
Yeah.
People don't buy advance tickets in this town.
Yeah.
Can we complain about that for a
We
second?
can complain about that. We can totally
No,
complain
buy
about
your
that.
advance tickets because that's one of the reasons that big bands don't come here is because they'll or why people cancel is that they'll like, oh, we're gonna play 2 months from now. Nobody buys an advance ticket
Yeah.
because everybody just expects to show up at the door or whatever.
Right.
And then they cancel because they're like, oh well, nobody was buying tickets. It's like,
Mhm.
well, that's not how we operate here.
Yeah, Memphis is like the perfect place for what they call a routing date, which
Mhm.
means like you're in Nashville, you're going to St. Louis, or you're in Nashville, you're going to New Orleans, or vice versa, and you need a place in between.
Mm-hmm.
And Memphis is absolutely perfect for that. And like, I think promoters are just starting to figure out how to develop a reliable audience in Memphis. I think the Live Nation venue, and I'm not like a huge fan of Live Nation, I think that's going to be helpful.
Yeah.
I think one problematic aspect of touring bands coming through is they do like the Graceland Live thing, or even Minglewood's kind of remote, and they don't really see Memphis. Like,
Mhm.
I mean, the first time I played, I mean, I saw Beale Street and the New Daisy, and then I took my little field trip to Stax. But yeah, like, I am very much in favor of encouraging the city to show Midtown to artists.
Mhm.
I mean, to be honest, like, I tell other artists, who are having a hard time in New York or LA or even Nashville now, like Memphis, man, it's cheap, and it's equidistant from many cities. It's like in the middle of the country,
Mhm.
which people don't realize. So like,
Oh yeah.
it's easier to get to the east and the west and the north and the south. It's a great place for touring musicians to live.
You can hit something like 80% of the population of the country in 8 hours.
Yeah.
8-hour drive.
Yeah.
And you were talking about the routing thing, and that's one of the things that I learned from I made the Antenna documentary is that in the early days of punk, there was LA, there was DC, the 930 Club, and there was New York.
Yeah.
Right. And if you were an OC band like the Black Flag or something, and you wanted to go play DC, Memphis is halfway there.
Yeah.
And so that's when people started, Black Flag stopped here first. And then they told everybody, hey, there's this place called Antenna. You can play on your way somewhere else.
Yeah.
And it sort of changed the way that live music happens in Memphis.
Yeah.
For a long time, I've been hearing rumors about people asking for like having to get their set lists approved by club owners again. And I was like, that went out in the 70s, dude. What are we even doing?
Wait, are people really doing that?
Yes. Yeah, I know. It's ridiculous.
What the hell?
I know.
That's crazy.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's how.
If you happen to be a touring musician not from Memphis and you're watching this, DM me,
Yeah.
and I will hook you up with a venue.
With the good
They will
venues.
not ask you to do that.
With the good venues.
Yes.
Well, Mike, we're all looking forward to it. Thank you so much
You're
for
so
coming
welcome,
today.
man. Thank
This
you.
has been great.
Thank you very much.
Memphis Flyer Podcast. We'll be here next week. Everybody go see Soul Coughing. See ya.